The International Christian Embassy Jerusalem is your embassy in the heart of Israel, founded in 1980. From our headquarters in Jerusalem through our branches in over 80 nations and yours in Canada, we seek to challenge the Church to take up its scriptural responsibility to remind Israel of the promises made to her in the Bible and to be a source of practical assistance to all the people in the land of Israel. On today's program, we visit Capernaum and learn about some of the biblical history of the town. Pastor Adam Gabeli speaks with Anne Ayalon, president of Christian Friends of Magen Adom, Israel. And our panel asks the question, is Evangelical Christian support for Israel hurting Palestinian Christians? Luke chapter 4, verses 38 to 41. He went out of the synagogue and entered Simon's house. Now Simon's mother-in-law was taken ill with a high fever, and they asked him about her. So he stood over her and rebuked the fever, and it left her, and immediately she rose and served him. Now when the sun was setting, all those who had anyone sick with various diseases brought them to him, and he laid his hands on every one of them and healed them. And demons came out of many, crying out, "You are the Christ, the Son of God." But he rebuked them and did not permit them to speak, because they knew that he was the Christ.
You can see the Jerusalem cross was the 4 additional crosses. Custodia Terra Santa, that is pure Italian, I think.
Custody of the Holy Land.
Yes, that's right. Every story in the Holy Land starts with something that happened here. And how did they know where are the places? Because people back then used to write journals, and they used to paint places that they saw. And that's how visitors got the information. They didn't have Mr. Google, and they didn't have any other options. And that's how the information went from generation to generation. When people started coming to the Holy Land 300 years after Christ, or even after, they came to the right places because it was a word of mouth information. So this octagonal church from the basalt rocks from the 5th century was built around Jesus' room. And when I was taking my Christianity course a few years ago, the one proof that I can give you that indeed this was from the time of Jesus was that this fence that surrounded the house is from the 1st century. So obviously when they were adding the modern church, it allowed people to look down and see the place where Jesus lived. So when you read, he left the synagogue and went to his home. We just walked the distance that he walked. Wow. Okay? All right. Ladies and gentlemen.
Let me say the final word just before we disperse and take pictures. Yes. Wasn't it interesting that she mentioned, that Raquel mentioned, how the Jewish community and the Christian community were together. And they worshiped together. There wasn't this sense of, back in those days, of this separation. And friends, if you read Ephesians chapter 2, Ephesians chapter 3, that ultimately is the ultimate plan of God and redemption. That the Jewish community, or the Jewish people with Gentile believers would become one to worship the God of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, or the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so when you consider that back then they were together, and unfortunately through the centuries, the Middle Ages in particular, you had Christendom, which is what came in. I really believe it was a spirit, it was a mindset where they saw the Jewish people as being not as important, and in fact separating from the Jewish roots of Christianity. And friends, that obviously has carried through the centuries. There are many churches, unfortunately, denominations, unfortunately, that have really become anti-Semitic because of what they've embraced called a replacement theology, which means, very simply, well, the Jewish people in Israel does no longer carry any significance. The church has now replaced Israel. I want to say to you that that is biblically incorrect, that a replacement theological perspective of the scriptures actually puts off kilter the very word of God. God's covenant with Israel was never revoked. God's covenant with Israel was never, ever stopped. He loves Israel. And when you consider that geopolitical Israel, the modern miracle of Israel today, when you consider that, that is a fulfillment of prophecy, and God's plan and purpose is for Israel, once again, as the centerpiece of end-time prophecy, is for Israel once again to take the stage along with the church. This is why Christians, those that love Yeshua, followers of Yeshua, you can't be a follower of Yeshua and not love the Jewish people and love Israel, the land of the Bible. You can't. I'm telling you right now. But I'm saying to you very clearly that the day will come, and it's seemingly right now appearing in Canada, where a plumb line is being drawn. Those that understand the role and the place of Israel, and those that will just embrace or move into a full embracing of replacement theology. And friends, I hope that you will never, ever embrace that thinking.
I will make of you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless them who bless you, and curse him who curses you. And in you all families of the earth will be blessed.
I'm Adam Gabeli, and I'm today in Vancouver, British Columbia, with Anne Ayalon. Anne is involved in the Christian Friends of Magen Adom, and it's such an honor to have you today. You are the wife of Ambassador Danny Ayalon as well, and
yes.
So you have many connections. You've been living in Israel for how long now?
40 years.
For 40 years. Mm-hmm. Well, it's an honor to have you with us today, Anne. I'd like to ask you a couple questions about CFMDA, which is the Christian Friends of Magen Adom. Can you tell us a little bit about it, even for our Canadian viewers?
Okay. Magen Adom, first of all, is Israel's national emergency medical services. Right. So we are the first responders, we are the blood donation, we are the ambulatory services to take people from any injured place or the front lines to the hospital. We are equivalent to your National Red Cross and your 911 combined.
Yeah, wonderful.
It's a very important organization. And Christian Friends of Magen Adom is the way that Christians can bless Israel in a tangible way, helping to save lives.
What a wonderful vehicle. How did you get involved? Is there a little story behind that or so forth?
Well, there is. I've had a long walk in my life, in my journey from my background, coming to Israel and meeting my husband and the service that we have done. But about 5 years ago, there was a wonderful Jewish man from England who said we need to improve and establish and reconnect with our Christian brothers. And so he asked me to please come on board as the chairman, and I agreed to do that. In this time, we were a desk within Magen Adom. He since has passed away.
Oh,
and
his memory be blessed.
Yes. He's a very wonderful man, Norman Feingold.
Oh, wonderful.
And then we decided it was an opportune time for us to make it an official, what we call an amutah, a non-for-profit charity organization, so that Christians can donate Israel in a very, very important way blessing Israel and knowing that their money is going straight to Israel for ambulances and motorcycles and all the supplies that you need. And when Christians come to Israel on a pilgrimage or a tour group, that they can give blood. Yes. And by donating their blood, they are saving lives. They are leaving a part of themselves in Israel. It's very exciting.
Yeah, and so significant. I know at the Feast of Tabernacles, there's that option.
Yes.
For the thousands of
yes.
Christian pilgrims. I don't
yes.
want to call them tourists, pilgrims going yes. To Israel at that time. And it's a wonderful opportunity, like you said. I want to talk a little bit about maybe the Magen David Adom in general. They don't discriminate between Jews or Palestinians, right? It's
oh my goodness, we service everyone in Israel, everyone. And not only that, but our staff, well, 80% of our staff are volunteer. The employees come from all across the spectrum of Israel. So that's Jew and Christian and Muslim, everyone working together in a very harmonious way. It really is a blessing to be able to work with Magen David Adom.
That's amazing. So you mentioned, of course, with the Christian desk of Magen David Adom and that connection with the Judeo-Christian connection. Do you have any thoughts about the relationship that seems to be growing and flourishing between, I would even like to say evangelical Christians, but even the whole Christian world and the Jewish state and the Jewish people?
It's been amazing. I've been there 40 years, and I've been allowed to see how relations have evolved and improved. Yes. There's been an education on both sides, because Jews coming from the Holocaust were suspicious of any kind of Christian support. And that's one of the reasons why it has been so important for me to have Christian friends of Magen David Adom, because we put on the ambulances Christian.
Right.
So that Israelis see there is Christian support of Israel, and that we are not alone. When we have an outbreak of war, that there is someone with us. I mean, we are a very strong nation. I don't ever want you to think that we feel not blessed and not supported by God. We feel very strongly in that, but we often do feel ostracized and alone. And a lot of that is because of the BDS and the propaganda
right.
and things like that.
Right. Well, it makes me also want to ask about your thoughts in regard to the embassy move of the United States Embassy move. You're born an American. That must be something that really is almost a fulfillment
It
of
is
dreams.
a fulfillment. It certainly is. I mean, in this time, we are watching biblical prophecy being
right.
fulfilled. So for any person coming to Israel, it is very exciting. But to see the American people agreeing finally and actually moving the embassy to Jerusalem, it's a day of such joy for us.
Wonderful. And I know, before even the American embassy, when all the embassies left Jerusalem in the 80s, the only one that was created, it was the ICEJ, the International Christian Embassy of Jerusalem.
Right.
Can you have, before we close, any comments on the relationship of ICEJ with Christian Friends of Magen David Adom, and maybe how that's impacted the organization?
I have had a long relationship with ICEJ and great respect. And your leaders have been amazing people. And so we are very grateful for ICEJ. And of course, Magen David Adom, the Christian Friends of Magen David Adom, came to ICEJ in Jerusalem to ask that we could partner together.
Yes.
And always at the Feast of Tabernacles, at the time of Sukkot, we've always had an ambulance there, and we've always had the blood donations. And so it has been a wonderful partnership. And on top of that, I do want to say that your Canadian ICEJ has been very generous and has donated to Magen David Adom in such a wonderful way with ambulances and motorcycles. And you do get the ministry's name on the ambulance.
Wonderful. So
that people do know that you are standing with us.
Excellent. Well, it's such an honor partner with the Christian Friends of Magen David Adom. Thank you for joining us today in studios, Anne Ayalon, and here in Vancouver, Canada. Bless you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Okay.
Opinions.
Welcome back to Inside Israel and our panel discussion. Joining us today is Bob Mayton, Donna Hallbrook, and Veron Rodriguez. Now today we're discussing, it's a Washington Post article, and it was written last year, but it has a very important premise that I have heard come up again and again. Here's the name of the title: Evangelicals Side with Israel. That's hurting Palestinian Christians. And this is the question that we're addressing today. The premise of that in itself, and is it really hurting the Palestinian Christians? I'd like to start with you on that one, Bob.
Well, thanks, Christine. I think the problem in Israel is essentially the global jihad which is happening, and I understand that the number of Christian Palestinians has decreased, and I doubt very much that it's because of Israel. I think it's probably because of the jihad which is going on. The premise that I have on this is that there's got to be separation between Israel and the terrorists who lurk in the Palestinian areas, and to the degree that there are people there who are innocent and who have no grievances against Israel and don't have any intentions of harming Israel. I think it's really unfortunate. I wish that there was some way that they could be accommodated and brought into Israel, but I don't see there are communities there which have very close relationships with each other, and I don't see the possibility of that. So I think I think to call it collateral damage seems tough and hard, but I think there are some side effects that are just inevitable in this situation.
Bob, before I go on to Donna, there's a point I'd like to make here, because when I was in Israel, and Donna and I were actually interviewing together a Palestinian minister, he came out openly and said, in accordance with what Bob was saying about it was the jihad that was going on. His life was constantly threatened, his church was being firebombed, and that is what's unfair to Palestinian Christians, that they're constantly being brutalized by Hamas, by the fighters of jihad in that particular territory. There tends to be in the media a sort of a setup of us versus them, but the Palestinians that we've interviewed, they have spoken about being threatened in the Palestinian territories. And of course, we're going to go on with this discussion because there are other angles to it as well. But Donna, can I hear your input when it comes to this title, Evangelical Side with Israel, that's hurting Palestinian Christians?
Well, you can look exactly into Bethlehem, the birthplace of Jesus, which was 80% Christian at least, and is now about 12%. So you ask the question is, well, why is that? And you have to look at that the Palestinian Authority did take control of Bethlehem, and many of the Christians have suffered. And you know, I've talked to cab drivers also, and they said, listen, I'm a Christian. We're told to forgive and to love. We can't live under this kind of threat, this kind of pressure. They're paying bribe money. They're treated as second citizens. They're leaving. They're either leaving right into Israel and outside of the Palestinian Authority, or they're leaving to other countries, and often to North America. And so this is a very, very big concern. And Justice Reed Weiner of the Justice Institute of Public Affairs, about 10 years ago, he went in. He didn't personally, he's Jewish, but he did have an undercover to do taping of this woman was a Christian living in Bethlehem, and she was raped by a Muslim man. Before that, she was ostracized. If you're Christian, they don't respect that, and they want you to be covered and act in a certain way, according to the Sharia law, even though you're not under Sharia law. And she wanted to commit suicide. This was all done in like her silhouette. So there are issues here, and then you see in the whole region where there is the Muslim, that influence of Sharia law, people are leaving. The Christians are being killed in those countries. And the only place that it is increasing is actually in Israel.
That the Christian population is increasing,
That they're
yes.
free to come and do
Yes.
what they want, have places open for worship. They respect that. Israel respects the right of every religion.
There's also something that I noted here too, that there's a Palestinian Holy Trinity that's been set up, and of course not all Arab Christians are buying into this there. The Palestinian Christians, some of them do, but most don't. And the Palestinian Holy Trinity was reported by Palestinian Watch, and the Holy Trinity was defined as Abbas, Yasser Arafat, and Jesus. Now, the thing about Abbas is that he was the one that was quoted as saying, and he did say it, that not one Jew will exist in a future Palestinian state, while Yasser Arafat was actually quoted. In fact, he said it on tape, quote, struggle, 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 combat, 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 jihad, 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 jihad. So this is the Holy Trinity we're talking about here, and I find that, if anything, very unfair to the Christians as opposed to the evangelicals siding with Israel.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. I think just speaking, even in speaking to that, it's more of the issues from those in Palestine that are, committing jihad, that is affecting the believers within Palestine. And I think evangelical Christians will always continue to support Israel because of our biblical stance with Israel. But I feel that most people need to pay more attention to the terrorism that's happening and how that's affecting the believers there. Israel is a peaceful country, and as Don alluded to earlier, there are many places in Israel that are open for worship for the Palestinian believers there. And so I strictly believe that we need to pay more attention, open our eyes to the jihad that's taking place in Palestine and how that's affecting those Christians.
Now, of course, we're dealing here with the meaning, the embedded meaning in this very unfair article against evangelicals. But I would say that in my experience with evangelicals, and I'd like to know if the three of you agree with me, I have found a lot of caring and support for the Palestinian people. Mm-hmm. I mean, they have been victimized by their own. And with Israel, it's an issue of supporting Israel's right to exist. But the Palestinian people are certainly not forgotten as a people by evangelicals. In fact, I know of a Palestinian minister who is very much in support of Israel's right to exist, but he's a Palestinian Christian. So what we often see set up in the media is a propaganda. It's not quite that way at all, because with our evangelical beliefs as Christians, we are commanded not just to support Israel, and there's a reason for it too, with their right to exist. We're also commanded to care about people as a whole, which I think all of you do, and I certainly do as well.
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement with that. As you said, evangelical Christians do believe and do care for all lives.
Yes.
And Israel is, my personal opinion is this, that they're more on the defensive than offensive. So as you stated earlier, in terms of their right to exist, Israel is not looking to, at least Christians, I don't believe that Israel is looking to do any harm. I feel as though they are more in a defensive position, and they're experiencing so much attack, and that attack unfortunately causes them to be in positions where they have to defend themselves. Yeah. And I feel as though the media definitely portrays that Israel is doing more harm than good when they're simply just trying to exist.
Well, in 1948, right after its birth, it was attacked. Again in 1967, again in 1973.
They're all wars of defense.
Yeah.
That's right.
Any quick points before we close?
It also raises the question about the identity of being a Palestinian, and whether that's important to the Muslims, or whether their Muslim identity is more important than their Palestinian identity. If they're willing to kill and burn the churches and abuse their Christian population, even though they identify themselves as Palestinian, then obviously their Palestinian identity to the Muslim side of the Palestinians is really problematic. They identify themselves as Muslims first, not as Palestinians, and I think the world needs to recognize that as the jihad goes forward, as the attempt to install a world caliphate goes forward, of which they are a part.
Donna?
The Corys are within Bethlehem, and they're evangelical Christians, Arab background, and they are on the front lines of something new. They want to express the love of Yeshua. with everyone. But they stand on they're being attacked. It hasn't been easy. I think Chaim Corey, who we interviewed, Christine one time, Dr. Chaim Corey, and
Yes.
they established the Holy Land Missions in Bethlehem about 1980. And then their son Stephen has a Calvary Church in East Jerusalem. So the evangelicals understand the Word of God, and they will stand, but they will also try to bridge. They're that bridge between the Palestinian Christians who might adhere to replacement theology and
Yes.
who might
And
identify
liberation theology.
more with the Arab Muslims. And also, so they're that bridge, and they're standing in that gap for the Lord, really, for everyone.
I'd like to thank you, all three of you, very much for joining me. It was a very engaging panel indeed.
We conclude our program today with some sights and sounds within Israel. Thank you for joining us today, and be sure to visit our website at www.icejcanada.tv or call us at 1-866-324-9133. And for our Canadian residents, you can ask for your free Canada Israel pin. Through your contribution, you can participate by giving to ICEJ Canada, to the Haifa Home for Holocaust Survivors, Women at Risk Red Carpet Project, Operation Life Shield Bomb-Proof Shelters, Shoulder to Shoulder Alias Support, School for the Deaf, Beit Singer Children's Home, Israel in Crisis, Beit Rachel Strauss Inclusive Community, Magen David Adom Emergency Services, Christian Friends of Yad Vashem, Scholarships for Canadian Young Adults to Experience Israel, Educational Fund, ICEJ Communication Media Fund, Gift, Estate, Securities Funds.